I wrote the words that would save me or condemn me with hands that still remembered burning. Look, I know how that sounds. Dramatic. Like I'm trying to make you feel something. But it's the truth. And honestly, truth is all I had left to give. The lamplight in my room was dying, the oil was almost gone, and I was too poor to buy more until Friday. But I needed to finish the letter that night. I don't know why. Maybe because if I waited, I'd lose my nerve. Maybe because another day of loneliness felt like drowning. You know, slowly, one breath at a time. My hands shook as I dipped the pen. The scars on my right hand, the ones that pulled the skin tight from my wrist to my knuckles, they caught the light, made shadows on the paper. 3 years since the factory fire in the Swedish quarter. 3 years since I'd watched my mother's skirt catch flame. Since I'd heard her scream. Since I'd frozen God. I froze while the doorway collapsed between us. They said I tried to save them. My parents. The neighbors. They told that story at the funeral. How brave I was. How I'd run into the flames. But that's not true. I hesitated. Just for a moment. Just long enough for everything to go wrong. The hospital mirror was the worst part. Worse than the pain. The nurse tried to hide it. But I saw her face first, the pity. The horror she couldn't quite mask. Then she showed me my reflection. The left side of my face. Well, the fire had taken my parents and left me with scars that ran from my temple to my jaw. Red and tight and impossible to ignore. I was pretty once. Does that sound vain? I don't mean it like that. I just mean I was the kind of girl men looked at, the kind mothers approved of for their sons. And then I wasn't. The Swedish community was kind at first. So kind. Brought food, helped with medical bills. But kindness has a shelf life. 6 months later, the young men who used to smile at me started finding excuses to look away. Mothers steered their sons toward prettier girls. No one said it out loud, they didn't have to. I picked up the mail-order bride advertisement from my desk. Montana, Thomas Grant, widowed rancher, seeking wife. Must be hardworking. Honest. Willing to care for 3 children. The other women in my boarding house, they were writing letters too. I'd heard them giggling over their lies. Comely. Fair. Pleasing to look upon. Making themselves into fantasies for desperate men. I couldn't do that. I tried. I sat there with my pen ready to write something pretty. Something easy. But the words wouldn't come. So I wrote the truth instead. Brutal. Defensive truth. I am scarred. Penniless. And desperate. I paused. The ink pooled where my hand had stopped. From downstairs, I could smell Mrs. Lindholm's cabbage soup, the smell of poverty, of making do, outside. Autumn wind rattled the window. Everything was cold. Everything was gray. But then I kept writing. I can work hard. I can cook well. I can promise loyalty. Those promises, they were the crack in my armor. Weren't they? the place where hope leaked through despite my best efforts to crush it. I promised things. That meant I still believed I had something to offer. That somewhere inside my scarred skin lived a woman who could be wanted for more than pity. I sealed the letter before I could change my mind. Walked 3 blocks to the post office in the dark. My coat was too thin for November, but I barely felt the cold. Fear kept me warm. Or maybe it was. I don't know. Maybe it was the last ember of hope, burning in my chest where I couldn't quite extinguish it. At the mail slot, I hesitated. My hand hovered there. Letter shaking. If I sent this, I was admitting I wanted something, that I needed someone. That loneliness was killing me slowly, and I was tired, so tired of pretending I was fine. I dropped the letter through the slot. It fell into darkness with a soft sound. Final, irrevocable. I walked home in the cold, hands shoved deep in my pockets, and thought I expected silence. Silence, at least. I knew how to survive. It was hope that would kill me. 3 weeks of nothing. I told myself I was relieved. I mean, it proved I was right. Didn't it? Honesty repels. Truth is a luxury only beautiful people can afford. I went back to my routines, sewing piecework, taking in laundry, making myself small and useful and invisible. But every day, I listened for the mail, hated myself for listening, hated the way my heart jumped every time Mrs. Lindholm's footsteps creaked on the stairs. Then on a Tuesday, I remember it was Tuesday, because that's the day I usually did mending, she knocked on my door, held out a letter. Montana postmark. For you, Anna, she said. Curious, pitying, knowing. My hands shook again, but this time not from memory, from something I'd forgotten how to name. I waited until she left, sat on my bed, the springs squeaked. They always squeaked, and just held the letter. Heavy paper. Good quality. My name written in careful script. Anna Bergström. He'd addressed me like I was someone worth the effort of good penmanship. I opened it slowly. Read it once. Then again. Then 17 more times. Honestly. Searching for the trap. Dear Miss Bergström, I received your letter. Thank you for your honesty, it's rare. And I value it more than I can say. My late wife was beautiful. Everyone said so. But she lied constantly. Small lies. Mostly. Where she'd been. What she'd bought. Who she'd talked to. By the end, even dying of fever, I think she lied about being in pain. Didn't want to burden me. She said, I never knew what was real. You told me hard truths. That means I can trust that other things you say are true too. That matters more than anything. I'm a widowed rancher with 3 children who need a mother. I'm scarred too by grief. We match. I think, if you're willing, I've enclosed train fare. Come to Montana. Let's see if broken people can build something whole together. Respectfully. Thomas Grant. I read that line, we match, over and over. We match. Like we were 2 pieces of something. You know, symmetrical. Equal. Not him looking down at damaged goods. But 2 people who'd survived things. Who carried scars. I didn't trust it. Look. I'm not stupid. Men who want mail-order brides, They want servants. Or they want, well, they want what they want. And it's never about partnership. But there was something in his letter, the way he wrote about his wife, not with anger, with sadness, tired sadness, like he was done with pretense too. I packed my things that night, not because I believed his kindness was real, but because staying meant slow death by loneliness. And I was so tired of dying slowly. The train journey took 5 days. 5 days of watching the landscape change outside my window buildings, giving way to farmland, giving way to prairie, giving way to mountains. Everything getting harsher, drier, browner. Summer drought had settled over Montana like a hand pressing down, squeezing the life out of everything. I rehearsed conversations in my head, his disappointment, my prepared responses, the words I'd use to protect myself when his face fell. When he realized that scarred meant truly ugly, not romantically wounded. In the train window, my reflection stared back. The scars were visible even in glass. I'd stopped trying to hide them months ago. What was the point? People saw them anyway. People always saw them first. The train pulled into the station on a Tuesday afternoon. Dust everywhere. Heat shimmering off the platform. The smell of sage and dry grass and possibility, I guess. Or maybe just desperation. I stepped off the train with my single carpet bag, heart pounding, throat tight, and there he was, Thomas Grant. God, I wasn't ready for him. He was tall. That was my first thought. Tall and broad-shouldered and weathered in the way of men who work outside. Sun-darkened skin, lines around his eyes from squinting into distances. Hands that looked strong, capable, handsome, I mean. Really handsome in the way that made my stomach drop. He looked nothing like a man desperate enough to send for a scarred woman across an ocean. My second thought, this is the trap. He saw me and smiled, actually smiled, warm, genuine, reaching his eyes. Anna Bergström. His voice was quiet, respectful. I nodded, couldn't speak. My tongue had forgotten how words worked. Welcome to Montana. I'm Thomas. He didn't stare at my scars, didn't perform that careful, not-looking thing people do when they're trying to prove they're not staring. He just saw me, all of me, and didn't flinch. I found my voice. It came out as a whisper. You didn't tell me you were beautiful. I meant him. I meant you're handsome, and I'm not, and this doesn't make sense, and what's wrong with you that you'd want me? He heard what I meant. He must have, because his smile softened. You didn't tell me honesty is the most beautiful thing I've ever read. Before I could process that, before I could figure out if he was mocking me or pitying me or what 3 children emerged from behind a wagon. A girl, maybe 8 years old, dark braids, pretty face, her left arm. It ended at the elbow. Just ended. The sleeve of her dress pinned neatly. A boy, younger, 6, maybe, walked with a pronounced limp, his right leg dragging slightly with each step, and a baby, no, a toddler in Thomas's arms when he turned to gesture them forward.
A little girl with wispy blonde hair and a birthmark covering the left side of her face. Port wine stain, they call it. Deep red purple from her temple to her chin, covering her eye, her cheek, her jaw. I stared, not with pity, with recognition. Thomas spoke softly. "This is Sarah, James, and Emma." He paused, met my eyes. "We're all broken here, Anna, but together, maybe we're whole. Will you help me prove that being broken doesn't mean being worthless? Not a rescue, not him saving me, an invitation to mutual wholeness." Sarah watched me with careful eyes, testing me, waiting to see if I'd look away from her missing arm, from her brother's limp, from her baby sister's marked face. I knelt. Slowly my own body carried pain. Old burns that still ached in cold weather. Knelt until I was eye level with Sarah. Held out my scarred hand. She looked at it, at the tight, shiny skin, the way my fingers didn't quite straighten. Then she looked at my face, at my scars. She took my hand with her single hand. "I think," I said, my voice cracking, breaking open, "I think we might all match." The first week, I kept waiting for something to go wrong, but nothing did. That was the strangest part. Nothing went wrong. The ranch was bigger than I'd expected. Not grand, no. Nothing like that, but solid. Well built. A 2-story house with a wide porch. Barn. Chicken coop. Garden struggling in the summer drought, but still producing. Cattle in the distance, scattered across brown hills. Thomas showed me to my room. His. Not shared. Private. "I thought you'd want space," he said. "To settle. To decide if you want to stay. No pressure. Anna, you're not a servant here. You're you're family. If you'll have us." Family. I hadn't had family in 3 years. The work was familiar. Grounding. I could hide in tasks. Breakfast before dawn, coffee so strong it could strip paint. Eggs. Biscuits. Lunch. Dinner. Teaching the children their letters. Mending clothes. Tending the garden that gasped for water in the drought. The house smelled of wood smoke and coffee and something I'd forgotten home. The children's laughter, Thomas's quiet presence, everything gentler than I'd expected. I watched him with his children, patient beyond measure, reading to them each night before bed, voices for different characters, making Sarah giggle, making James lean in close, helping James with his chores without making it obvious, without diminishing him, braiding Sarah's hair every morning. Clumsily. But he tried, never raising his voice, never harsh. I kept cataloging evidence, searching for the performance, for the moment when kindness would reveal itself as temporary. It never came. One afternoon, Sarah found me in the kitchen kneading bread. She watched for a while. Then, would you teach me to do that? With one hand. I looked at her, at this brave girl who'd learned to button her own dress, to tie her shoes, to do everything with a single hand because the world
wouldn't adapt to her. I think, I said slowly, we could figure it out together. We developed a system, her bracing the bowl with her body, me showing her how to use her palm and forearm for leverage. It took longer, made a mess. We laughed. We actually laughed when flour ended up everywhere. James brought me wilted wildflowers from the dying garden. For you, he said shyly. Papa says you like pretty things. Emma fell asleep in my lap during the worst heat of the afternoon. Heavy, trusting, sticky from jam. Her birthmark pressed against my arm. And I thought we're all marked, all carrying visible proof of what we've survived. Thomas and I worked side by side fixing a gate. Our hands brushed accidentally. We both flinched. Both apologized. The drought's bad this year, he said, driving a post. Worst I've seen. Cattle are struggling. Sweden had droughts too, I offered. Selected information. Safe information. We learned to make do. You miss it, Sweden. I thought about that. I miss my parents. The people they were before I disappointed them by living. He stopped, looked at me. Anna, you didn't disappoint anyone by surviving. I wanted to believe him. God. I wanted to believe him, but belief felt dangerous. Hope felt dangerous. That night, alone in my room, I wrote in my journal, they are kind. This should make it easier. Instead, it terrifies me. I know how to survive cruelty. I've never learned how to survive kindness that expects nothing in return. The back pasture fence was broken in 3 places. Critical fence without it. Cattle would wander off searching for water that didn't exist. Die in ravines. Get lost. Thomas asked me to help mend it on a Thursday. The kind of hot day where the sun felt personal. Angry. Like it wanted to burn everything down to ash. We walked out together. Carrying tools. Wire. New posts. The ground was hard, so hard the post digger barely made a dent. Everything dry. Everything waiting. Here, Thomas said, pointing to the first break. Split wood. Wire sagging. We worked in silence for a while. Him digging. Me holding wire steady. The heat pressed down on us. Sweat ran down my back. Soaked through my dress. My hands ached. The scarred skin didn't flex right. Never had. And gripping wire made it worse. The fence resisted us. Wood split when Thomas tried to drive the new post. Wire wouldn't hold tension. Frustration built like the heat heavy. Suffocating. Finally. Thomas sat heavily, wiped sweat from his face, stared at the broken fence like it had personally offended him. My wife used to lie about small things. He said quietly. I went still. We didn't talk about personal things. We talked about work. About children. About weather. Safe things. What she bought in town. Where she'd been. Who she'd talked to. He wasn't looking at me, looking at the fence, at the distance. I never knew what was true. Even at the end, dying of fever, I think she lied about being in pain. Didn't want to burden me, but it meant I couldn't trust anything, couldn't help her, couldn't know her. She was beautiful and kind, and I loved her. But I never really knew her. I should have stayed quiet, should have kept my armor up. Instead, I heard myself say, "My parents died in the fire because I froze." Thomas looked at me then. Everyone thinks they tell this story about how I tried to save them, how I ran into the flames. But that's not true. I hesitated. Just for a moment. The doorway was there. Clear. And I froze. My mother was screaming. The fabric of her skirt was burning, and I just stood there. By the time I moved, the doorway collapsed. They died. I lived. My voice was shaking. I tell people I tried to save them. That's the lie I live with. That I was brave. That I did my best. But the truth is, I failed them. And then I survived. And sometimes, I think the scars are what I deserve. Silence. Just the wind. The distant sound of cattle. Anna. Thomas's voice was gentle. Lying about it doesn't dishonor them, it dishonors you. I looked at him. That's why I needed your letter. He continued. You told me hard truths. Truths that hurt you to tell. That meant everything else you said about loyalty. About work. About who you are. That was trustworthy too. I've lived with lies. Pretty lies. Kind lies. They still rot things from the inside. Truth. Truth is the only foundation worth building on. Something in my chest cracked. Not broke cracked, like ice in spring thaw. We went back to the fence. This time, working with new understanding. Thomas angled the post differently. I held the wire at a different tension. The fence held. Not perfect, you could see the patches. The places it had split. The wire wrapped around imperfections. But it held. It did its job. Walking back to the house in late afternoon light, Thomas said quietly, I'm glad you came. Anna. I couldn't answer. My throat was too tight. But I thought, he doesn't want me to be perfect. He wants me to be true. And I don't know how to be that without losing all my protection. Saturday meant town. Supplies, flour, sugar, coffee. Things the ranch couldn't produce. Thomas said we'd all go a family outing. He introduced me as his wife. We'd had a quiet ceremony the week before. Just legal. Just practical. No romance. No pretense. Just papers signed to make things official. I dressed carefully. My best dress well. My only good dress. Knew what was coming. You can't hide scars. You know? You can wear high collars and long sleeves. But faces are visible. The town was small. One main street. General store. Bank. Saloon. Church. Respectable people shopped on Saturdays. We walked down that street. And I felt every eye turn. Felt the whispers start. That familiar weight
of being seen and found wanting. A woman pulled her child closer when Emma toddled past, like birthmarks were contagious. A man made a comment loud enough for us to hear about damaged goods matching up. I'd survived this before. My shoulders tightened. But I could handle it. I'd built armor specifically for this. But then I saw Sarah's face, heard James's sharp intake of breath. They'd heard. These children who'd done nothing but be born, who'd survived things no child should survive, they'd heard themselves called damaged, and something in me ignited. Not for me, for them, in the general store. The shopkeeper hesitated when Thomas tried to pay, made a show of counting the money slowly. "Surprised you bring those children around decent folk," he said. Casual, cruel. "Some things shouldn't be displayed." I stepped forward, voice cold, clear, every word deliberate. "Those children are braver and kinder than anyone in this room. If you won't take our business, we'll find someone who deserves it." The shopkeeper's face reddened. Thomas put his hand on my back support. Not restraint. We left, found another merchant, an older man, weathered, who simply smiled at the children and filled our order without comment, without judgment, like they were just people, just children. The ride home was quiet, children in the wagon bed, Thomas handling the reins. No one spoke. That night, after dinner, Sarah climbed into my lap. First time she'd initiated physical contact. She was small for 8, light, her single arm wrapped around my neck. "You didn't hide," she whispered. "Mama used to hide, said it was easier to just not go to town, not be seen. But you didn't hide. You stood there, and you defended us." My heart cracked wider. I'd spent years hiding, years making myself small. But these children, they deserved someone who would stand in the light with them. Scars visible, unashamed, even if it terrified me. A week after town, evening routine, normal, peaceful. I was braiding Sarah's hair, a ritual we'd developed. James was reading aloud, practicing. Emma played with wooden blocks, stacking them, knocking them down. Giggling, Thomas stood in the doorway, watching, smiling that soft smile he got when his children were happy. James looked up from his book. "Anna, does your face hurt?" The room went still. Sarah froze under my hands. Thomas's smile faded. Emma, oblivious, kept playing. Simple question. Child honest? Direct. I could give the defensive answer. The one I'd perfected. It's from a fire that killed my parents. Fact without feeling. Shield without vulnerability. I'd used that answer 100 times. Kept people at a safe distance. But Sarah was listening. Sarah, who'd been asked 1,000 cruel questions about her missing arm. James, who'd been mocked for his limp. Emma, who would face stares her whole life. They deserved better than defensive truth. "Let me think about how to answer that," I said quietly. Finished Sarah's braid, tucked Emma into bed, went to my room, sat in darkness. The old voice in my head familiar.
protective. You've given enough. They don't need to know the rest. Keep yourself safe. But another voice, newer, stronger. They showed you their broken pieces. They're waiting to see if you'll show yours. I remembered the fire. Not just facts feeling. The smoke choking me. My mother's scream. God. I can still hear her scream. Waking in the hospital. The mirror. The nurse's pity. The first man who looked away. Then the second. Then everyone. The loneliness that followed. The way it carved me hollow. I'd survived by building armor from brutal honesty. By rejecting myself before others could reject me. By telling people what was wrong with me first. Controlling the narrative. Protecting myself from hope. But these people, Thomas, Sarah, James, Emma, they were offering something different. A place where broken didn't mean worthless. Where scars were just part of the story. Not the whole story, but only if I risked being truly seen. I washed my face, looked at my reflection in the small mirror. Really looked. The scars were still there, would always be there. Tight, shiny skin, red-pink lines, the permanent mark of the fire. But maybe they didn't have to mean what I'd always thought they meant. Tomorrow. I thought, tomorrow I'll answer James's question. The real answer. Not the one that protects me from pain. The one that might let me have what I've never had, people who know me fully and stay anyway. Morning came, purpose and terror warring in my chest. Breakfast was normal pancakes, coffee, children chattering about nothing. James didn't bring up his question. Sarah had probably told him not to. I appreciated their care and knew it was exactly why I had to speak. After breakfast, I asked them all to sit. Kitchen table, morning light through windows. Thomas watching me carefully, ready to protect if I needed him to, but waiting, letting me choose. I looked at James, at his open, curious face. You asked if my face hurt, I said, voice steady, hands shaking in my lap. The true answer is yes, not the skin that healed, but for a long time. It hurt because I thought it made me unlovable. James's eyes widened. Sarah went still. I thought no one would want me. I continued. I thought I was ruined, worthless. I rejected myself before anyone else could reject me. Told myself I was nothing, that I deserved loneliness. That's what I thought about my arm, Sarah whispered. That it made me wrong. People say I'm slow, James added softly. Because I walk slow. I started to believe them. Even Emma seemed to sense the weight of the moment. She stopped playing, came to lean against my leg. I took a shaking breath. When I wrote to your father, I told him I was scarred and desperate. That was true, but I didn't tell him that I was also lonely, that I wanted to matter to someone, that I was tired, so tired of pretending I didn't need people. Tears now. I didn't hide them. Let them fall. I came here thinking I'd be useful, thinking that was enough, but you've all made me feel wanted. not just useful, wanted, for who I am, scars and all. Sarah stood, walked around the table, put her single arm around my shoulders. We want you, not because you cook or clean, because you're you, because you see us, really see us. James nodded. Not the broken parts. Us. Thomas finally spoke, voice thick. Anna, that letter you wrote it was the bravest thing I'd ever read. Not because you told me about your scars, because you told me you were desperate. Desperate is the hardest truth to speak. It means admitting you need something. He took my hand, his scarred, work-roughened hand, my scarred, fire-marked hand. We all need each other, he said. That's not weakness. That's being human. That's being family. I broke, sobbed, laughed, held these children who'd chosen me as much as I'd chosen them. Emma patted my wet cheek with her small hand. Love, she said, one of her few words. Love Anna. And I realized I'd spent years believing there were two kinds of honesty: defensive honesty that kept people out, and vulnerable honesty that let them in. I'd thought defensive honesty made me strong, but vulnerable honesty, the kind that admits to hope and need and fear, that was real courage. That was what these children showed every day. That was what Thomas showed in his letter back to me. That was what I chose now. I love you too, I whispered. All of you. So much. 2 months later, the drought broke. I stood on the porch, watching the first rain in weeks. Real rain. Not the teasing sprinkles that came and went. Actual rain that soaked into the ground. That made everything smell alive again. Thomas stood beside me. Didn't speak. Didn't need to. The children played in the puddles, shrieking with joy, Sarah splashing with her single hand, James stomping, his limp forgotten in the pleasure of mud, Emma toddling, falling, laughing. Later, I walked out to the back pasture, to the fence Thomas and I had mended. It still stood. Not perfect, you could see every patch, every place it had broken. The wire wrapped around splits in the wood. But it held, did its job. That's us. I thought, patched together, visibly mended, holding. I'd spent years believing broken meant worthless, that scars disqualified me from love. I was wrong. Not because scars don't matter, they do. They're part of my story. The fire, the loss, the loneliness that followed. All of it shaped me. But they're not the whole story, and they're not the end. Town hadn't fully accepted us, probably never would. But a few people had. The old merchant who always smiled at the children, a rancher's widow who brought vegetables from her garden, a teacher who welcomed Sarah and James to school without hesitation. We didn't need everyone, just a few who saw us truly. That evening, Thomas told me he loved me, first time spoken aloud, not in passion, in exhausted. Peaceful truth, over coffee, over the day's last light.
I love you too, I said. Meant it. Completely. I didn't come here for love, I added. I came to survive. Maybe that's what love is, Thomas said. Choosing to survive together. Family dinner. I looked around the table, at Thomas with his grief scars, Sarah with her missing arm, James with his limp, Emma with her birthmark, me with my fire scars. All of us broken, all of us whole. Not despite being broken because we were broken together, because we'd chosen truth over pretense, vulnerability over armor, each other over isolation. I picked up Emma after dinner, kissed her birthmarked cheek, looked at Thomas over her blonde head. Truth brought me here. I thought, but love the kind that sees scars and doesn't look away. The kind that admits to need. The kind built from honesty all the way down, that's what made me stay. And I'm not going anywhere. Not ever. We're all broken here. But we're also whole. And that's worth everything. End.